They're just going to say a few brief words now, and we're going to have a question and answer session at the end once you've watched the screening, and it'll be your chance to ask them some of those burning questions once you've watched this beautiful film, which I have to confess moved me so much that I started to cry when I watched it, and I thought, wow, it's a film about motorkites. How can I cry? But wait till you see it, and I'll just let John and Marcus say a couple of words.
Thank you, Annie. I'd just like to thank Annie for having us.
Yeah.
To thank the Dungog Festival for having us. This is our first regional screening of a film that takes us that takes us 4,000 kilometres across the country. So there's definitely a synergy there for us, and it's wonderful to hear that it's a film that can move people. Hopefully, we've often described it as a bucket of fun full of important stuff. So hopefully it has both those gestures in it for you here today. We're doing a Q&A afterwards, so just wanted to remind you to stick around, ask us curly questions afterwards if it's inspired you to do so. Marcus?
Yeah, look, the same. Thanks. I've got to say, this is just fantastic to come back to Dungog. I had a film here 7 years ago in the festival, and it's unreal to be back and see the festival alive and well, and that it now involves food and wine. And I reckon Dungog, Dungog rocks. Look, this film's actually really important because it's one of the few films that's been made in the last year that's a genuine cross-cultural collaboration between Indigenous Australia and non-Indigenous Australia. And it's sort of, if you like, disguised in an adventure film, and then as you'll be watching, you'll begin to see that there's been a huge amount of effort made on the part of the filmmakers to work really closely with the Indigenous community to kind of fly right into the heart of Indigenous Australia in a really fun and positive way, which I think is nice for a change. So I hope you enjoy it, and I look forward to the questions afterwards for John and myself.
Yeah. And look, we're very sorry the director of the film couldn't be with us, but we're just very happy that we've got John and Marcus with us. I did forget my little bit at the beginning. The festival wouldn't be possible without the very amazing support of our sponsors, in particular Destination New South Wales. The idea of Destination New South Wales is to bring people out to regional Australia and show them how wonderful it is out in the country, outside of the metropolitan areas. So, you know, this festival is happening because of them, so that's fantastic. Also Hunter Water and Settlers Arms and all the other sponsors who've been involved. And if you're a local person, go and support those businesses because they have supported the festival and we wouldn't be here without them. So thank you. Great.
Yeah, enjoy the film.
So I'm sure you'll agree with me that was just a hugely entertaining and informative and you know, quite an amazing film when you think about what they did. Give them a hand. I think when I first saw this film, I just went, those two guys are crazy. And you know, John can probably agree with me. John, so how did you actually meet the boys?
Aidan and Daryl are mates, and Charlie and Aidan are old mates. So Charlie made a film with Aidan years ago when Aidan hand-built a catamaran, and as you do, and sailed it to Indonesia. And Charlie was part of the crew on that boat and made a documentary. So they knew each other from that. 2009, the end of 2009, Aidan gave Charlie a ring and said, mate, I'm thinking of flying these crazy motorised hang gliders across the country. Do you want to make a film of it? And Charlie immediately said yes. Came to me, I optioned it, and that was the beginning. And that was the end of 2009. So it's kind of taken 6 years since then.
And John pitched it to me at the documentary conference in 2011.
So there you have it, folks.
It's been a
If you're
campaign.
thinking of going into the filmmaking business to, you know,
Think
make
10 years.
fast turnaround, forget it. So
Next one's going to be quicker, next one's going to be quicker.
Next one's going to be faster, definitely, yes.
Marcus, you were approached at the documentary conference in 2011. What appealed to you about this film?
Oh, look, straight away, as soon as I met John and Charlie in the bar, and as soon as they told me they were making a film about two guys who were trying to kill themselves,
That wasn't exactly our pitch, but yeah.
I was immediately in, because that's the kind of films that I've been involved in making. I think it's why I was introduced by Simon Nash, the other executive producer.
Exactly.
And what happened actually is these guys said, oh, we're trying to put it together and we want to do this and we want to do that. And I said, well, and I pulled up a beer coaster and I wrote a bunch of numbers on the beer coaster as to how they could finance the film, because it's really hard to finance films that don't fit the reality TV kind of genre or don't fit the mainstream genre. And as soon as you say the word Indigenous, you're almost immediately knocked out. But fortunately in Australia we have a fantastic funding system that actually is open to Indigenous stories. And so I wrote a bunch of numbers, and then the guys, John came back 2 years later after they'd shot it and rang me up and off we went.
And it did take some years after that moment as well. I mean, we ended up, for various reasons and a broadcaster pulling out for unrelated reasons, we ended up having to shoot through self-finance in 2013. Yeah. So that meant scaling back our production and the way we were going to shoot it, and we kind of took that punt that it was worth shooting, that it was worth backing, and then from there we had to find a way to actually make it.
Yeah.
What you did then? I'd love to hear some questions.
In fact, yes, and I'm, ladies and gentlemen, just going to leave these terribly enthusiastic gentlemen to it. We've got an awards ceremony shortly, and I'm still pumping out certificates. It's at 8 o'clock. I hope to see you all here. It's free. We'll show a couple of short films, hopefully at the end.
Yeah.
Two questions in one. What was the motorbike connection, and were those 600cc two-stroke engines motorbike engines?
They're more akin to lawnmower engines. They're not, but they are two-stroke, yeah.
So it's just sort of an allegorical thing with motorbike connection, because they wouldn't be motorbike.
They're often described as a motorbike in the air. Yeah, so the experience is akin to that, I suppose.
Being a motorcycle.
Yeah.
What's actually funny is the word motorkite doesn't exist.
We made that up, yeah.
This film's had about 8 different titles. I know, because I was the executive producer who was trying to work out what's called the chain of title, the copyright. And I kept going, what is this film? There's like 10 different versions of this. And but I thought Motorkite was a fantastic, and then to add dreaming in there was just perfect.
And that name, Motorkite Dreaming, actually came in Balgo, the pilot's quarters. We were staying in there.
Yes, I'm embarrassed here because I thought it was motorbike dreaming.
Right.
I've got motorbikes on the brain.
Motorkite, yeah. They're kites. They're often called trikes.
Yes, over here.
How much did the film actually cost? Because they were always short of money.
Oh, as in whilst they're out in the field? Well, John's better to answer that, because that part of it was self-financed.
Yeah.
And then there's the other part that I was involved in. John's better to answer that.
So, in terms of the trip, the two couples were responsible for their own journey, and in particular, Aidan and Daryl did fundraising for quite some time to scrape together the money for their journey. And prior to that, they had to buy the microlights, so they bought them for about 15 grand each, secondhand on eBay. And
from a shed.
Yeah, and we filmed going to that farmer's place. I'm pretty sure it's in here, where picking one of them up. So they were very much self-funded amateur adventurers, just on the smell of an oily rag. For us, because the broadcaster pulled out and because we had to find a way to shoot it through private finance, the shooting bit cost about 50 grand. And that was
Smelled an oily rag.
Very much so. I mean, 6 of us on the road for a 9-week shoot. Swags every night, it was the costs were minimal to an extent, but that was tight.
I think that it's a really interesting question, because one of the things that's always, I've made a lot of adventure films, and one thing you have to be quite conscious of when you're making an adventure film is what's the line as the film production, what line do you cross in terms of financing the adventure? Because the adventure should be in and of itself authentic. And as soon as you come in and finance the adventure itself, does it become inauthentic? Because suddenly you're introducing, of course you can write a check to get out of any problem. And so in this instance, my understanding is they were very much separate. There was no rescue check, as you saw in the story. which could have been there, I guess, you know, like the rescue check when they're really in trouble. And I think that's what actually gave the film a lot more heart.
And that was a very conscious conversation that we had with them before, and you know, that was the deal. We'll do the filming, you guys do the adventure, you know, even though they were linked. But...
We interrupt this program for a very special announcement. I did forget to say earlier that the Lights Out and Listen session up on the pop-up cinema is in 2 parts with an interval, so once this is over, feel free to, you can still go up there. It's a free session, and it's beautiful stories from the ABC, listening in the dark. It's gorgeous. So
Wonderful. Thank
straight
you.
from here, up the hill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, down the front.
The process of filming, the definition of those images was just stunning. Those aerial views. You know, the best I've done is sit on a flight from Adelaide to Alice Springs at dawn and just be boggled at what's out the window, and really pissed off because everybody wants to read their newspapers and pull down the little blind. But that view of the landscape
It's unique.
is more in an hour and a half here than I've ever managed to experience in my life.
And the technology is GoPro cameras.
Well, there are, but on this big screen, it just looks
This,
stunning.
this is something that was really interesting is 10 years ago, this film you could not have made the way we made it.
No.
You certainly couldn't have been in a situation that I was in where John is the producer and Charlie is the director with the editors, where I'd watch a cut and I'd say, you know what, it'd be great if we had an angle of this. And they go, yeah, no problem. And it would be there. To have done that 10 years ago, you would have required other aeroplanes with camera mounts that cost $15,000 a day. It just wouldn't have been possible. It would have cost $15 million.
The only thing that we tried, but when we had to scale back, we couldn't afford, was looking at a few situations where we get an external chopper shot to get
Both
that
kites.
glory shot of both kites. And there's a couple in there that we flew to where one kind of films the other, and you get a reference because you're on the wing, but it's not a hero shot that we kind of envisaged initially. But there's a kind of intimacy, I suppose, to the way it's ended up with. It's attached to the microlight. It is one and the same. We had 3 on each trike,
Right.
and we built a kind of aluminium tubing housing and experimented. And it was only after a few weeks in that we kind of found the happy balance where we were getting a down shot, the tracking shot, as well as fear cam and wing cam, you know, and then permutations of that.
So you haven't got a gizmo to adjust the angle of those?
No.
You-
They're
Pretty wide.
wide. They're pretty wide,
Yeah.
wide angle, yeah. And then we had 3 cameras on the ground for, you know.
But how did you feel about the moment where we intercut between the paintings?
Oh, magic.
That was great.
Magic.
How unbelievable was that? I've never had a moment where I've understood what a songline truly means until it was explained properly by Carol Carpenter. And then we saw that moment where we're mixing between the paintings,
It's evidence, isn't it?
and it's evidence of the notion of the idea that there was this ability to navigate across the entire country through song. And I'd never seen that captured before quite so clearly in a film. That, for me, that was my magic moment. Yes. Oh, yeah.
What role did sponsorship play? You know, it's got Mendelssohn, Motorkite or whatever it was. Did that, you know, form a large part of the budget or not really? Or?
If only.
I mean, for them, they got some limited sponsorship from, you know, a parts supplier that they put on the side of their car. A few companies chipped in to help their adventure. They were also fundraising for the Royal Flying Doctors and the Purple House charity. So they kind of tied into that in their fundraising, and sponsors would jump on board for that. For us with the film, we didn't have sponsors as such. We, over the years, have approached a number of companies to invite them to sponsor it at various points, but it hasn't occurred as a sponsorship as such. Yeah, as distinct to, you know, broadcasters and funding bodies and all the rest of it. Yeah.
There was a question here.
Just further to your the analogy with the paintings, they were so each painting and that bit of landscape was so similar. You must have had some Aboriginal person who was so familiar with the art and the environment where they were. So you know each part of the landscape and then that painting completely
The matching.
matched it.
Yeah,
Amazing.
I agree. And look, that's full credit to Charlie, the director, and to Sarah, the editor, Sarah Edwards. And they, so the concept was something that was broader than the two of them in terms of wanting to do a breakout at that point, wanting to use that opportunity, that flight to look at evidencing seeing it from the air and the art. We had got a whole heap of art from Papunya Arts out of Alice Springs, and so we had a great resource to work with, and then those two matched it up in the edit.
More inspiring.
Yeah, and I think also the important part about that was how do we, because these guys have produced a 5.5-hour TV series that's going to be on SBS2 and NITV very shortly. That's a spin-off from this movie, and one of the things we're always looking for is, well, how do you cut this so that it's not television, so that it's actually cinematic?
That's an example.
And
of that, yeah.
that scene probably would never make it into a television cut.
And didn't, yeah.
And didn't, because the executives at Red Bull and SBS and NRTV, you know, it's all a bit kind of trippy, you know. And that's exactly, when I saw that, I said, that's cinema, not television. And that's why it should be in the film. There was a question up the back.
You sort of answered part of it, but coming back to the footage, like you said, you had all of those GoPros, so you would have had, I'd imagine, hours and hours of...
About 500,
How do you
yeah.
condense it?
It said 1,000 in the newspapers today, but that's okay.
Yeah, that's probably overstretching it.
Sorry.
So how do you condense it into 30 minutes? And you've sort of answered my question that what could you use some of the other footage for? Because I'd imagine there'd be stories in there that we didn't see or hear about. Like it was a long journey put into 30 minutes, 90 minutes.
So we came back from shooting with somewhere between 500 and 1,000 hours, depending on how much you count. A lot of that GoPro, because you've got we had 8 to 10 GoPros running
All day.
times, you know. So plus A, B, and C camera, and plus audio comms as well, which are terrible to log. So the simple answer is heaps and heaps and heaps and heaps of time. And heaps and heaps and heaps.
But
of
you
work.
had like 2 people just sifting it, didn't you, John?
So I mean, the funny side now, in retrospect, is we kind of got back, and Charlie kind of disappeared into a dark room for months, and kind of did loose logs, I suppose. So scanning through and doing his thing, and then at the end of that, he's like, "JC, how come we haven't made the film yet?" And it's like, well, all right, now we've got it logged, we know what we've got, we can work through that.
Yeah.
And it took years after that.
So you have assistant editors.
And then assistants for
I think it was
8 months.
Yeah.
Prep, yeah.
So what they do is they literally watch through everything, but you've told them the story beats. So their job is to sift through those hundreds. So my job as an executive producer is to mathematically work out how many hours of labour is required to go through I was told it was 600 hours of footage, which if you just divide it by, you can only really do about 20 hours of footage a week as a person, because you just get too tired. You can't watch 40 hours. And so my job is to mathematically work out how many weeks of labour do we require and how many people to just watch through everything to find the story beats that we have identified are important. And then once you've found them, they extract them and distill them down. So the actual editors are only looking at, it wouldn't even be 50 hours.
Though to their credit, they were constantly scanning as well.
Yeah, and then you go back and you
Constantly
scan through stuff, yeah.
Just in terms of the edit, because of the way it panned out, we were doing the feature and the 5-part series simultaneously. So we actually had 4 edit suites happening simultaneously. One was the feature, and the other 2 were TV episodes, and then the 4th was an assistant editor. and the assistant would feed in information that was needed for a particular cut. So you're looking for this type of thing. Part of their job was to isolate, and that would draw on the logs and also the knowledge of the material, which accumulates.
Up the back, yes.
If you were to do the shoot again, production again, on the same budget, and did the trip again, is there anything that you would change or do differently?
Oh, great question.
It was on the same budget.
Yeah, firstly, a different budget.
Yeah, different budget. Yeah, that's a really, really good question, and the answer would have to be yes. Specifically what, I'd need to think about a bit more perhaps, but...
Data wrangler.
Well, I mean, yeah, because I did a lot of that and I wouldn't put my hand up. So it's a hell of a job, but... Look, this film, to be honest, was written in the edit, and there's a benefit to that, and we had the wonderful opportunity through the hard work that Marcus and I did in terms of the financing structure to have that luxury to write a film in the edit.
But you don't know where it's going.
Well,
so
you don't, but that's the creative process, and we had that luxury because of what we were able to pull together. Now,
they don't even want to be professional adventurers. You know, they're one's a remote area nurse, the other's an IT person. So, you know, you're not following people whose job or intent is specifically to build a media career and build a career around professional adventuring or being a presenter. And so that presents a very different paradigm as filmmakers to going out with two people who might have been like, right, you know, my life's ambition is to be on television and my life's ambition is to... They were genuine and authentic in their desire to do what the film sets up as the conceit, which is to go and visit and have a cross-cultural experience in Australia that few of us have had. And certainly one of the things I found very exciting and interesting about that was the idea that when Red Bull came on board for their global television network, that this show is going to be screened in 180 countries as a television series, and you're going to have people all over the world, you know, who have a very keen interest in, you know, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australia, because there's a, you know, a lot of, you know, there's a lot in the media about it that's very negative, and, you know, and where there's a lot of perceptions around it that are quite reasonable, but there's also a fantastic side to it that's rarely explored. And so, in a sense, if you're saying, were you going to go back and do it again, I'd argue, no, it should be done the same way, and that's what attracted me to the story. Because if you took two professional adventurers out there, it would have been all, you know, it could have become contrived and potentially didactic. And didacticism is the killer of a good adventure film.
One tweak I would make, I completely agree. I don't, you know.
We've never talked about this, by the way.
We haven't debriefed on this, but not changing any of that. But one thing I probably would tweak, the dial 10 degrees, would be more regular daily interviews in situ with people.
Deconstructing what's happening.
If that's possible, again, because everybody's exhausted and it's dark and, you know, it's raining or it's dusty or whatever. But thinking about it out loud, that's something that would have been really, really useful. We had to do that in ADR. We had to pick it up.
Many digital dialogue. So
yeah.
It was like 4 or 5 visits back to Adelaide to interview them.
To pick up those missing beats. Yeah. And there's always going to be missing beats, but we could have got more in the moment with an energy that was there. So, yeah, that kind of discipline would have been handy a bit more.
So where does the film go now? Film festivals?
Look, it's what we call a long tail. With our belief in this film, it will have a long life.
I think I just saw an Instagram post that there's a screening happening in another country town. So people can do this thing called cinema on demand now. It's fantastic. Yeah. So people just order the film and we send them a print, and then they screen it in their town with their community.
So we premiered with a film festival, which was Hot Docs, and that was a Melbourne, Adelaide, Sydney, and that was terrific. And then off the back of that, we toured it, much like an indie rock band, around the country with Carol and playing music and doing Q&A with Charlie and the adventurers involved. And what that did is put it on the map, didn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And we got some great reviews. Audiences have consistently been enthusiastic about it. We've had some great houses. And where we're at now is how to continue that momentum, not only with digital release of the film and cinema on demand, like Marcus just described, but also we're submitting to other film festivals, of course, absolutely, that's part of that. But we're also gearing up to the TV series, which is screening later this year as well.
I really want to fly across America.
Yeah, totally.
No, seriously.
Totally.
I mean, Indigenous America is extraordinary.
As an opportunity to get to get to know your own backyard.
Yeah, totally. And I'd argue I've never seen any television. I don't know if anyone else has. Has anyone here seen a show set in America about, you know, non-Indigenous Americans travelling across their country in this way and learning about Indigenous America?
Yeah,
I've never seen it.
With a guide.
No. So and you know that would be the logical
Extension.
place to go next, because you know Indigenous America is extraordinary and deep, and I know nothing about it except what I've seen in cowboy films. Yes.
The question's probably already been answered. I just want to clarify. The old artist was actually painting the songs. Yeah. So those pictures were from actual songs that describe the land.
Yep.
Morris Gibson.
Quite extraordinary.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make.
It is extraordinary. So he's seen the land from above without flying.
Yeah.
We're getting closed in on. We're happy to keep chatting right now, here or in the foyer or whatever. Thank you so much, everybody.
Great. Yeah.
That was just really awesome. That was the best Q&A, by the way. We've done heaps of them.
Sorry about the dumb question.
No.
Dancing and films.
So hang around for the Q&A, guys. We're happy to answer any questions.